Hello, everyone. I am Timothy Pinkston, a member of the Association for Computing Machinery, ACM, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. And I'm the organizer of this ACM DEI Council Indigenous Peoples Heritage Awareness Month celebration panel event. Welcome, and thank you all for participating. For those of you who may not already know, the ACM is the world's oldest and largest computing society with over 5 million people who use ACM's products and services, including the ACM Digital Library. The ACM DEI Council works toward raising awareness and accountability in support of our diverse community and ensuring ACM activities have an inclusive and welcoming atmosphere, inclusive of persons from all racial and ethnic backgrounds, as well as other dimensions of diversity. One of the many efforts we undertake is celebrating heritage awareness throughout the year. Today, we are delighted to host an exciting panel composed of persons from diverse backgrounds who will share their insightful perspectives on the important topic of preserving cultural data and language sovereignty, while also benefiting from emerging technologies in the AI era, challenges and opportunities. So, without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn things over to our distinguished panelists and panel moderator, who will provide their brief remarks on this panel topic for the first 45 minutes. And then we'll engage in Q&A with the audience for the remaining 15 minutes of this panel hour. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Cynthia Lindquist, our panel moderator. Cynthia.
Thank you, Dr. Pinkston, and welcome. I'm Petuwashte. Chante washte na pete yuzapi. Heya shunka wakam we chakbi wea emakiapi. Mini wakam oyate edwati damakota. My relatives, my friends, my Dakota name is Star Horse Woman. I come from the Spirit Lake tribe in Fort Totten, North Dakota. I am the former president of Chandeska-Chistana Community College, Spirit Lake Dakota tribe in Fort Totten, North Dakota. And I'm really, really honored and proud that Dr. Pinkston reached out to me to help serve as the moderator for this distinguished panel of very different people and from different academic institutions and perspectives. Our primary focus today is on your, you have it available on the site, on the ACM site, but preserving cultural data and language sovereignty while also benefiting from emerging technologies in the AI era, challenges and opportunities. And the panelists have come up with the questions. There are 4, and we're going to try to get to all 4. But I'd like you to at least hear formally each of the panelists introduce themselves. So I'm going to begin with our furthest relative from way over in New Zealand, Dr. Keegan. Would you just take a moment to introduce yourself? Everybody has our bios on the website.
Tēnā koe, Cynthia, kōrua ko Timothy Otira koutou katoa. So yeah, as it says, my name is Te Taka. I'm from Ngāti Maniapoto, Ngāti Apukura, Ngāti Parau, Ngāti Whakau. We're 4 tribes in the central North Island of New Zealand. I consider myself a language activist in that I'm actively working to support technologies that support our Indigenous language, and have been looking a little bit lately about how well or not well the AI technologies are working for Te Reo Māori. So really pleased to be on there. I think I'm perhaps one of those different people on the panel. So tēnā koe, Cynthia. Kia ora, everyone.
Thank you. Dr. Chandler, would you just give us a brief intro from yourself?
Well, hey, Nanisa Nithawak, Nanana Ani Nan. I'm Sean Chandler. I'm from the White Clay people of the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation in north central Montana. And I'm the president of Ani Nakota College. And we too have a language immersion school that was inspired by the Maori. So thank you.
Dr. Hermany Horses from a different perspective in Colorado.
Hello, my name is Ian Hermany Horses. I'm an assistant teaching professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm also a Sichungu Lakota. I grew up on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, and I train future math and science and computer science teachers.
And Dr. Guy, our fellow Tribal College president from New Mexico.
I'm Elmer Dow. I'm president of Mount Temple University, located in Crown Point, New Mexico, on the Navajo Nation. And our school is somewhat unique. It started out as a skills center where we provided a workforce of youngsters for our area. And it's a university now, but we still maintain and provide trades as part of our offering. And we specialize in STEM education. So not to be understood.
All right, panel, let's get to work and do our job. Our first question, and I'm going to ask Dr. Keegan if he'll start us off, but the first question, why is data sovereignty important to Indigenous people? And what threats do emerging computing technologies, including generative AI, pose to Indigenous languages, peoples, and culture? Kind of a big question, but we've got a smart team of panelists. And Titaka, if you would take us off for the beginning.
Okay, kia ora, Cynthia. Kia ora, everyone. So this is a big question. I feel like I could almost talk an hour for it, but that would be unfair on everybody. The thinking that we have is that Indigenous data should be in Indigenous hands. Indigenous people should have the right and should have the ability to define that data, to analyze that data, and to use it for Indigenous benefit. For me, that's what Indigenous data sovereignty is about, replacing or placing Indigenous data in Indigenous hands. I think a big part of it is educating Indigenous people to be able to use that data in an appropriate way. So there's Indigenous data sovereignty, but I also think Indigenous digital sovereignty is quite important so that we can train our people to use our data in a way that's important to us. If we look at generative AI, for me, that's an example of the opposite of Indigenous data sovereignty, where in terms of language data, and I'll use the example that I know about the Māori language. Māori language data has been used in some generative AI tools to produce an AI that can speak our language. And we have some issues around that, like the tools work really well in our language. My phrasing I use is they work scarily well. And that's an issue because they work so well, our youth will start to use them, and then our language will start to change to replicate what the tools are saying. Generative AI that are speaking our Indigenous language do not have the same controls as if the language was learned from our elders. Because when we teach our languages, we don't teach everything all at once. We teach aspects that when the student is ready to receive them, then they're ready to teach, we're ready to teach them. But AI doesn't do that. It'll just teach everything. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is that from our Indigenous perspective, we are comfortable with many truths. We're comfortable with different tribes have different versions around, for example, the creation stories, or some of our historic stories, or how we connect to our land and to our rivers and to each other. So we have different versions, but when our data is taken and processed by an AI, it will just produce one version. And there's the fear that that one version will become the truth. We were comfortable with many truths. I think there's some opportunities for language learning that AI provide, but there is some serious concerns, and that's why Indigenous data sovereignty is very important. Kia ora, everyone.
Oh gosh, you're actually generating more questions and interest. But Dr. Chandler, would you like to respond to that question also?
Oh yeah, I was busy taking notes down. That was so interesting. But I was going to talk about, as you know, in the late 1800s, our traditional lifeways were banned, outlawed, and our ancestors were under so much pressure to not be practitioners of their lifeways, pressure to not hand down their knowledge for fear that their own children would be punished in some way. So ceremonies, language, thousands of years of knowledge or data were forcibly forgotten. But some of those things, people went underground with that knowledge or data, and they passed it on, underground, and maybe waiting for a time where it could come out. And or maybe that time is today with our tribal colleges. And so today, some of us are lucky enough to hold on to that knowledge. And as a result of our history, what I just talked about, we're very protective of that. So it's natural that we get fearful of that knowledge being out there in a digital world, ready to be commodified or exploited, possibly in some way where we no longer own that data. And then it's us trying to buy it back from whoever created that program or whatever that is. That's all I had for that.
Good points. Dr. Hermeni Horses, your perspective.
Yeah, data sovereignty is very important because I work in the education space. I work with an organization called Indigigenius. We do AI education with high school students. In particular, we have a camp called Lakota AI Code Camp. And our students are awesome, and they're on the cusp of talking about what other panelists are talking about, like us being able to use this and do something with our own data. We are currently bumping up against, like, what does it mean for us to do something with our data, to actually be in control of it, and to have some overarching guiding policies and practices coming from our own people that I think fits in that area of data sovereignty. How do those of us that have had some more experience in the world help guide those youth with skills to kind of help us to take that next step forward? I have a bit of a fear that those of us who have some power are a bit behind our youth who are developing these skills, who are ready to do something with this, and we don't have a great answer. And I fear a little bit that our answers are kind of sticking our heads in the sand of, like, it's got to be protected, but nobody can do it. Nobody can really use it. And I think we need to work as fast as we can to get past that so that we're exercising our sovereignty. We're not just kind of building up walls.
Yes. Good answers, good responses. And Dr. Guy, your perspective about data sovereignty and its importance.
I just like to add that I think security to protect privacy or the security of any data stream is also becoming increasingly difficult. This means that protecting ownership of cultural, linguistic, and other aspects of a people's private and communal lives, and the development of cybersecurity to protect all aspects of sovereignty, that is so important to Indigenous people. And it is very challenging to protect. I think oftentimes we look to our Indigenous nations or tribal governments to develop policies or laws to protect the intellectual property of Indigenous nations. So it is very important, and we have to, I think, do our part to protect it the best way we can. Thank you.
Good, good, good. And of course, raising more questions and interest, I hope. All right, let's move on to our second question. And Dr. Guy, I'm going to start with you. How should academic institutions, or actually any organization, protect cultural data while at the same time take advantage of these various platforms, including to help restore Native, Indigenous languages, cultures, lifeways? Kind of a big question also, but Dr. Guy?
Thank you, Cindy. I think the important thing to me is that Indigenous colleges and universities, we have to provide the highest educational attainment and expertise possible to our students. And those students can then go into Indigenous communities and governments and provide the expertise necessary to protect cultural data while not cutting off the ability to use advanced AI, social media, and other computing platforms to improve the economic and well-being of Indigenous people. There are technologies, the various aspects of technology as tools to illustrate how benefits from emerging technologies get involved in tribal government bodies and community groups and make community presentations or projects that benefit individuals or communities, making the college and university's knowledge and expertise available to the communities. And I think the curriculum is also important to where it teaches about cultural data security and sovereignty. And it should be integrated in the general education curricula that emphasizes culture and language. And I think that I can start there, and then I'm sure my colleagues will add to what I provided. Thank you.
Yes. Dr. Many Horses, would you like to respond also about how should an academic institution protect cultural data while at the same time trying to embrace these new technologies?
I think the key term that I think about with this stuff is in partnership and in community. There is a necessity of conversations that need to start and also need to continue as we grow and we learn more along the way. Eventually someone's going to make a mistake and an overreach, and there's no way to repair that without maintaining conversation and lines of communication amongst stakeholders. So I think that's primarily where I'm at, is I'd like to see us work together a bit more to figure out what is appropriate and being willing to shift as we move forward in making sense of using these technologies and understanding what data we collect and what the implications of leveraging that data are going to be. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Dr. Chandler, would you like to comment?
Well, I'll just add a little bit. At our college, we thought about starting up a database. Would be protected, password protected, and the most recent cybersecurity things that we need to do with that. But I was kind of nervous because, on the other side, we have a program going now, software program called Matilda. I don't remember the acronym of each letter, but it's to measure the pitch of a word. We have fluent speakers recorded that it'll go into this program, and then a learner will come up and try to match the pitch of that word. It'll do a little noise graph, and so we're into that right now. But again, we're still making sure it's in-house, and if students want to use it, or eventually the community, we're going to open it up. But another thing I was worried about is like access to places or areas that hold, they hold knowledge, like a cure for an illness, for instance. At one time, a staff member wanted us to map out all these with elders, map out all these places and put them on our website. And I objected. This was about 20 years ago, and I objected because of that exploitation and things that have happened with other reservations in terms of that.
I'm going to just take a moment as your moderator, which gives me a little bit of leeway, but for our participants, I'm not sure that you would know what is a tribal college university. But just in general, there are 38 what we call TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, that were created in the 1960s. We have, we're in 16 states. We have 90 campus sites, and 82% of those campus sites are on Native reservations in this country. The uniqueness of a TCU is that we're chartered by a tribal government. Primarily, there are a couple of anomalies, meaning that they are federally chartered. We have approximately 20,000 degree-seeking students and another 50,000 community college education or community education type of programming for our people and communities. A tribal college student is typically a 30-year-old single mother who works full-time. So the students who attend our institutions are not your traditional college student. We have about 1,700 faculty members in the TCU system. And of those 1,700, less than half, approximately 44% of our faculty are Native. So we have a gap and a plan toward the development of more Native faculty. Now, in the mainstream world, you have these other things called MSIs, minority serving institutions, or Nasanti, and I'm not going to remember what Nasanti, but it's Native serving institutions, meaning they have a high number of Native students in that. And again, the uniqueness of a tribal college or university is that we are chartered by our tribes. We believe we represent tribal sovereignty, that we're a good representation of tribal sovereignty. And all of our institutions have at the core the teaching, the perpetuation of our respective cultures and languages. So just to give you a perspective, because both Dr. Chandler and Dr. Guy and myself are from the TCU world and system, but this is ACM and a DEI panel in honor of Indigenous Peoples Heritage Month. And obviously we have Native Indigenous people across the world. And I'm so proud to now meet and get to know Dr. Keegan. And Dr. Keegan, you can answer that second question, but maybe speak a little bit too, also about the education system that you teach in and that you're part of. And there is a relationship between the tribal colleges and New Zealand, the Maori people in New Zealand, and the Australians and across the world. It's called the World Indigenous Higher Education Consortia, WINHEC. And actually, there's a big conference next year in New Zealand called WIPSE, the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. Just to put a plug in for that. But Dr. Keegan, if you'd speak a little bit more about your institution and how you've come up through the ranks as an Indigenous higher education leader, teacher.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. First of all, I just want to reiterate one of the comments that came out. Thank you for that background about the colleges, the tribal colleges, non-tribal colleges. But also, Cynthia, even though you're the moderator, I think you still had valuable input. So please feel free, or please find time to answer the questions themselves, yourself. So I work at a university called Te Whare Wānanga Waikato University. And even though it has a Māori name. The name is after a river called the Waikato River, and it's named after the Waikato area. It's not a Māori institution. It's a Pākehā. It's like a colonial university. And the work that Indigenous people are able to do in these colonial institutes it's restrained, shall I say. It's quite difficult because there's few of us, and for quite a long time, Indigenous knowledge wasn't really seen as a true form of knowledge. So a lot of Indigenous people have been working to get our knowledge systems recognised in a non-tribal university and get our ways of researching recognised as well. So there's been a lot of battles along the way with that. So for me, I'm in the computer science department. My focus for the last 30 years is how can technology support our language? How can our language, our Indigenous Māori language, thrive in the technology space? So that's where I've dedicated most of my efforts to. And for in terms of a career, perhaps it's been to my detriment, but in terms of supporting my people, it's just been totally the right course for me to take. To go back to the question, so the questions are, how can Indigenous colleges and universities protect cultural data? We have just embarked on a new research project. I'm not sure if the funding's actually been ticked off, but it would be shortly. And we're going to ask specifically that question, but we're not going to ask it in an Indigenous college. We're going to ask it in like a mainstream university. And our approach, so we're going to approach the answer to that in 3 separate steps. The first step, what we're going to do is we need to identify where traditional culture is. Who has been researching we need to identify where traditional data is. So the researchers who have been working with Māori, where's their data? Where's it been stored? How do we find it? So part 1 is just going throughout our university, going through all of the research projects that's been happening, all of the reports, speaking to all of the people we can, even seeing if we can use technology to try and sift out where is all that data located. Once we've identified the data, our second step is to put in place policies to protect that data. So at the moment, the university doesn't have policies specifically for Indigenous data. Let's change it. Indigenous data is separate to mainstream data. So let's put in policies specifically to address that, and then enact those policies. Part of those policies will be about working with the provenance of the data, where the data has come from, who it belongs to. The third stage, so stage 1 is identify the data. Stage 2, put in some policies to protect the data. Stage 3 for us is going to be engaging with the communities who the data belongs to. And it's reaching out to the communities. Are you aware we've got this kind of data, we've got this type of data, we've got this type of data. Are you aware that it's here? You are the custodians of that data. It's here. How would you like to engage with it? So that's kind of a 3-step process. Identify, create policies, engage with communities. I'm not sure how successful it'll be, but that's the approach we're going to take. The second part of the question talked about how can we take advantage of artificial intelligence and social media. That's happening. Social media, our not so much our staff, but definitely our students are using social media. Our publicity campaigns are going to social media. So that's kind of happening. I see that artificial intelligence is just the next step in development. So my kind of thinking as a technologist is we should let it happen, be aware of all of the ramifications, try and protect ourselves, but not specifically try and block it off, because we won't be able to block it off. The technologies are can be so useful that people are going to use them whether they're good or bad. So it's more about, okay, well, the technologies are coming, they're here. How can we use them for our good? How can we identify and make people aware about the bad parts, but then utilize the good parts? And for me, that's kind of the fun part of technology, but how can we do it within our own language or through our own language, in the medium of our own language? How can these new technologies support our language? So those are some of the questions we're asking. I'm thinking it's not really a good way to answer a question by posing more questions, but that's the nature of the beast, I guess. Hilda.
That's the education process, isn't it? And the search and quest for knowledge, and how do we, prepare all that? And in some aspects too, I really appreciate your response, because you speak to the role of being protector, of who is safeguarding this work. And both at the student level, as we train them, let alone that tool that we're teaching them how to use to advance that. Dr. Chandler, did you have another point or comment? Did you raise your hand or no?
Oh, no.
All right. For our participants in the audience who are joining us virtually, we are going to allow questions and answers at the end. So if you're putting questions in the chat box, yes, that's the appropriate place. And we're going to leave time at the end to hopefully get to all of those. So please do keep doing that. And maybe Dr. Chandler, since I called on you already, let's start with the third question, which kind of ties into the first two questions already. But how best can institutions, again, our organizations, develop curriculum, experiential education projects, and research agendas to cultivate the creativity and ingenuity inherent in Indigenous cultures, and then to advance that progress, and again then embracing these new technologies, these new tools?
All right. Well, like we've done with a lot of our programs here on campus, a good thing to do is seek that guidance from those who are fluent in language, culture, our life ways. Ask them what is appropriate to put out there. Seek our tribal IRBs. I think most of our tribes have IRBs, or most of our tribal colleges have IRBs, and in some cases we have our own tribal research codes out there. And our fluent elders, ancestors, they weren't static either when it came to new technology. So I'm pretty sure that they would use this new technology, but as was pointed out, they would use it in an Indigenous way. And kind of repeating before too, we do have to ensure once we do that, we have to ensure those policies are in place to make sure that we own this knowledge, which we inherently already do, but we still have to get these documents in place to protect us. And I was just thinking about even our designs in some of our artwork. Some of those hold sacred meaning. I know I've seen places repeating sacred designs for fashion, and without acknowledging or compensating or whatever. And then it's someone else that owns it. I mean, we always borrowed from each other different things, even ceremonies, and received inspiration from each other, but it wasn't a blatant kind of thing and out for our own gain. So.
Yes, very well said. Indigenous people, I feel, really do. There's some core values about compassion, generosity, sharing, learning from each other, and adapting to whatever changes we were living under at certain points and times in our history. But Dr. Hermeni Horses, would you want to take a stab at answering that third point about how best to develop curriculum, learning opportunities, research agendas?
I think part of this, again, goes back to that partnership model I was talking about earlier. So I do work on curriculum. My PhD is in computer science education, and I grew up amongst Indigenous people, and I've been trying to blend those two worlds ever since. I think if folks are interested in developing an appropriate approach for their community, and I recognize that like communities that could be 2 counties apart from each other have different approaches to things. those home communities need to make some space to work with folks. I've certainly run into issues working with my own home community, trying to introduce computer science to those spaces. And I recognize there's big fish to fry. There are serious challenges back home, and doing an extra cool thing like computer science feels like that's not where we need to focus right now. I tend to disagree, as I've made some life choices that have brought me down this path, but I think there is a future that we're going to be left behind from, unless we start to engage with this ourselves and start to, reach out to those of us that are recognizing that this is important and kind of working with us to figure out what is the best next step. I'm not saying those of us that have pursued computer science ed have all the answers. We're figuring stuff out a lot along the way, but we would like to do this with our home communities and with communities wanting to figure out what is the best approach that works for them. And we've learned a lot from the Maori people, because they're a little bit further ahead of us in terms of how do these types of communications and relationships happen. So yeah, I think reach out to folks, start to do the work, start to make mistakes, start to get things right. Recognize that this is going to take us a while to figure out, but the first step is the first step. And I think a lot of our communities have not taken that first step yet.
Good point. Good point. President Guy, some comments on this about how best to develop curriculum, the education program, or research agendas to cultivate that traditional or indigenous knowledge.
Well, thank you. At Navajo Tech and many of our tribal colleges and universities, we have faculty members who are non-native. So we have to work closely with our faculty members. At Navajo Tech, we emphasize, especially our new teachers, the importance of experiential models of education curriculum. Research shows that students learn more effectively when knowledge, skills, attributes, and values that are important to the discipline are integrated into projects that involve students in either research or benefiting their community, or exploring areas that they are familiar with. At Navajo Tech, we encourage joint projects that where students can work together in small groups to achieve either research or project objectives. That group learning is either in the classroom or in the community. We also have been working to develop laboratories to where you provide opportunities to freshmen to get involved in working with various equipment, as well as reaching out to high school students, providing dual credit students an opportunity to really get to learn about using different machinery and get their interests in engineering or biology, chemistry. And I think it's really important to open those opportunities for them. Partnerships is also critical with the private sector, as well as the national laboratories. Those opportunities really lead to motivating students and the learning that they get from providing internships at these places, I think is very important. Some of the examples just to share with you is that we test water in our community, mainly for farmers and ranchers. So where we are testing water filtration units so that our animals could have a clean water. You know, many times we see on Navajo where they have a windmill, and on that windmill, it'll say something like, not for human consumption, animals only. And people think that, you know, why should animals just drink water that is unsafe? Because we eat those animals. I mean, it don't make sense. So that's why we're trying to get our students involved to solve some of those problems. Another is in partnering with NASA, we did this laser technology and robotics to scan a cave, one of those lava caves, and mainly to look for any life or mineral makeup in those caves so that the same technology could be applied when NASA is looking at Mars or Moon to see if there's anything that we've learned from those caves could be transferred into to the further research. You know, things like that. It just goes on. Clean energy. You know, trying to come up with ways to manufacture solar panels using advanced manufacturing, for example. You know, a lot of times what we do is we look at ways of improving our economy. All of these projects that I mentioned can create economy. And I think that's also an important aspect of learning and tying it into something that will benefit our community, but at the same time create economy on indigenous communities. Thanks.
All right. Kind of running down to the wire here because we had planned to do the Q&As at about 45 of the hour here, but I'm going to take a stab at trying to get you all to respond to our last question. How can we further improve access to computing technologies and other related research resources in tribal communities while supporting or promoting sustainable development? I just think this is such an important question. So, and why don't we begin with Dr. Hermenihorses?
All right. I'll name something up front. In our communities, we start teaching computer science. Making it a focus and a goal of hiring teachers, training teachers, providing space for our community members to decide what are the appropriate approaches for having environmental and wildlife sustainability. And so that when our communities take bigger steps, there is an informed population of folks that are of us, that were raised with us, that can make some informed decisions. I think right now one of our challenges is when we're reaching for future technologies, we are going through a consultant process where they don't quite understand who we are and what our goals and our values are. So I think at the baseline, we need to start being sure that we're educating ourselves on, yes, what folks do outside of our community, but so that we can have a better lens to decide what we're going to do within our communities. And that starts by making a deliberate call and a deliberate effort to creating teachers and educators and creating spaces for them to thrive and giving their students interesting, fun challenges. As part of the Lakota AI Code Camp, the last few years, we've had students, train an AI model where it's recognizing plants traditionally known to our own people. And so they can, one, learn what those uses of those plants are, right? Cultivating and sustaining that knowledge. But also, the next step of that is, all right, let's say we have a drone and it goes around and takes pictures of everything in our area, and we can monitor what are the natural things that grow in our area. And we're preparing our students to do that, but in a very small way, not in a way that's like in every one of our communities, in every one of our schools. And so I'd encourage us to consider, how do we take that next step? How do we make that type of future a reality where we get to lead ourselves in a tech space?
Oh, good one. How about Dr. Chandler? Do you have a comment on that one?
I'll be real short. I'll be real short, but kind of talking about what Dr. Hermione Horses was saying. I think finding those indigenous people that have that knowledge of IT or AI or technology, and hopefully those individuals are well versed in tribal life ways at the same time, so they can find those points of connection to exist together without those fears and dangers. But I was just thinking about our buffalo research that we do on campus. We research buffalo diet and land management and all that. And I was just thinking the advances we could do for sustainability in that regard too.
Our relative, Dr. Keegan, how about for what you're trying to do with language and language revitalization and preservation? Do you got an app that you've created?
I think these are technologies that can go a long way past an app. I really support what the other people have been saying here, in that we have to get buy-in from our communities. And often there's a gap between our community leaders and the youth who don't have any problems with using technology. So part of what we want to do is we want to release our younger people and allow them to do what they will be able to do, because they're brought up in a different world. They're brought up with connection. They see things and they look at things quite differently. But like I do agree, we do need to train our teachers to be able to teach them. In terms of the things that I'm specifically looking at around language, language, of course, is really, really important, because language is identity. The more you can speak your language, the easier you can identify with your culture. So how can we use these technologies to support language, the learning of language? And if we take AI, for example, an AI will be available to you 24/7. You can ask it the same questions over and over and over. It won't get angry with you. It won't get upset. It will always be pleasant. It will always be inviting. So there's opportunities there where AI that have been trained in our language can really support language growth, but it's only at a certain level, like a conversational level. But when you need to understand the depths of that language, then I think you have to sometimes put the technology aside and engage closer with the community and closer with the elders. One of the things as well is that it's kind of there's different approaches for the different amount of speakers you have in your community. With the community that I'm involved with, we have a number of speakers, so we have an approach, but lesser communities with lesser speakers would have different approaches. And I think technology gives us opportunities where we can tweak it depending on our circumstance. So I'm a technologist. I'm excited by what it can bring, but it has to be with our communities, with the thinking of our communities, with our worldviews. It can't be somebody else coming in and saying, here's some technology for you. So for us to build technologies around our communities have to be involved. Our young people have to be involved, because they will come up with ideas that no one else has thought of. And I think it's an exciting time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, we are down to the wire, and I do want to get to the questions, and either Maya or Dr. Pinkston, I might need some help. I'm opening up the Q&A. So I guess bottom question I'm reading here, it says, can ACM help by adding statements for Indigenous sovereignty, since ACM is a worldwide organization? Ooh, good question. Colleagues, would you have a response to that? What could we tell ACM would be a nice statement? Go ahead and just chime in.
But perhaps we could challenge ACM. What are the ACM policies around the protection of Indigenous data and the support for Indigenous data sovereignty? I don't know if ACM has policies around this, but if they haven't, why haven't they? What would they look like?
Yeah. Well, I want to give credit to ACM and Dr. Pinkston's leadership because, and granted, yes, this is Native American or Indigenous Peoples Heritage Month, but taking advantage of that, to promote diversity and worldviews and perspectives. To me, again, that's a key component of education. Is to be able to have that discourse and have it in a good way and searching it all out. So I do want to give kudos and applaud ACM and their DEI council under Dr. Pinkston's leadership for doing this for us to broaden that perspective and having this discourse. But colleagues, any other comments about a statement for ACM?
I just want to second it. I think when we talk about data, particularly in the modern world, it's often data mining. There's an extractive component. There is an economic component of we want to use this data to make money. And that's not necessarily how we view our data within our communities, or that we'd want it to be in the position of being used in that way. And so how can ACM help? And how can we help the ACM communicate that, to develop some sort of common understanding of here is where we are coming from, and here's things that we actually think would be good for you to consider as well, because data sovereignty is not just unique to Indigenous cultures, but you look at farmers and ranchers in South Dakota, where I'm from. They have their own practices and their own ways of doing things that why would they offer up that data as well? How can all communities work with the powers that be that have access to resources to improve what they're doing with technology? I think data sovereignty should not be an Indigenous only perspective, but how do we help individuals to think about it for themselves? How do we help other communities to think about it for themselves? We're in a unique space where I think Indigenous folks are in a position to lead on some ideas within technology. And this is one of those spaces that I think that, there would be benefit in us helping the ACM out and the ACMLs helping us out.
We are a resource to our tribal communities, always emphasizing culture and language, while also pursuing economic development and broadening technology access and the benefits of research projects that can provide thorough experiential education to the community.
And I'll just add that I think a statement or a policy statement like that would be a great benefit to this. I think that shows that support, and I think it'll help build that trust. And in Indigenous communities, that trust takes a long time to come about, and you have to have patience and all that. But I think something like this would help both sides, or all the communities, to come together on this.
I think that's well said, President Chandler, specific to Indigenous people. You might say we have a trust issue, trust me, I'm from the federal government kind of thing, where, but we truly, I think our core value is the belief in people and the belief in humanity and the compassion of human beings and working together to find solutions. And yes, we're talking about something that's very high level, I guess you could say, relative to computing and technology, AI, and all these things, which again they're tools to help us to get along, to help solve problems in that. And I think ACM is on its way to doing that. There was one other question. It's a very long question, but the essence of the question is, how can we help with other underrepresented populations, meaning, so like there's good representation from the United States, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, First Nations Canada. Communities in the global South remain underrepresented in research and research initiatives to protect their cultural, linguistic, and data rights. Do we have any suggestions, or how can we better outreach to them to be part of the discussions of that discourse? I guess is the question or the comment.
And Cindy, I just want to say that I think we have challenges to where we don't have we don't have enough professionals that we would like to have in engineering or in the Navajo language instructors, so we have to grow our own people. We have to grow our own professionals. And by doing so, TCUs, we are building our capacity. We are providing programs at the associate level, baccalaureate level, master's and PhD levels. And I think opportunities for faculty exchange, student exchange is also something that we need to strengthen. And I think that's where we can work with other communities, other indigenous communities, where we can share the knowledge. You know, at Navotech, we've been talking with Taiwan and Australia, Canada, to allow students to intern, and they can learn about their culture, and then they could learn about ours as well. So, you know, among indigenous cultures is very similar. There's many areas are very similar, and I think if we can take a global view of our education, take it globally, I think it's going to be a very exciting thing to do for our faculty and our students. And it's just not just a Crown Point where we serve. I mean, we have to think globally, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Other panelists want to comment?
I might also add on our side of stuff, we got to start writing and documenting and having things out there for folks that are looking for something to find. That's something I've struggled with, is like recording stuff and like putting it out there so that other people can follow a model. I'll say for the work that me and my colleagues do with artificial intelligence, we've certainly learned from Maori people on what they're doing around large language models to support their own knowledge and language base. So we're learning from them, things that we're figuring out here. We all need to kind of have ideally some passive ways for people to figure out who are some folks they can reach out to. Just that start of the conversation where nobody actually ever met, so that folks can send that email, you know, get on a call like this. Those types of subtle things I think matter. So maybe a call to action for us to start writing stuff down and maybe having a repository of information somewhere. I think there's a lot of good work happening in a lot of different places where it's a little bit difficult to find and put it all together. So what steps can we take maybe to put it all together?
Yes. Well, and that's maybe a good segue, since we're going to finish up here. We've got about 2 minutes left, but I'm going to mention 2 resources specific to the United States. One is the American Indian Higher Education Consortia, ahec.org, or the American Indian College Fund, collegefund.org. Both of these entities are tribal college and university bodies or organizations that were created by the presidents of the tribal colleges and universities. Both AHEC and College Fund are beginning to create resources, or a pool of resources relative to what's going on via the tribal colleges and universities. Faculty research, what's going on, what's the capacity, what are the needs, including, I saw there was a question we're not going to get to relative to broadband and the needs of broadband in Indian country, in the United States and that. But AHEC and College Fund are working together to not only pool and have a list of resources of who's doing what where, but also best practices and communities of practice specific to various categories, including STEM, the development of STEM and STEM faculty. So please consider those and reach out to those. We've also included a reading list. If you're new to American Indians and Alaska Native people in the United States and want to learn a little bit more, there's several books that speak to different things. One of my favorites is a book called Indian Givers, which talks about contributions of the indigenous people of the world and the gifts that indigenous people have provided the world, from foods to names to practices and everything. It's just a wonderful, wonderful book and eye-opener relative to indigenous knowledge and who we are. In closing, I want to say Mitakiawasi. We are all related. Padamia, thank you so much for your time and attention.
And I wish to thank all the panelists who did an excellent job. I've learned so much. And Cindy, Star Woman, you did a great job monitoring the panel. This has been so interesting, and I'm glad this is being recorded so people around the world can see and benefit from the knowledge that was dropped here during this hour. Thank you so much, and happy Indigenous Peoples Month, everyone.
Thank you.